You're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
All right, everybody, welcome back to RBLR Lightning. My name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me, it's Joe Zamotaro, Matt Cannon. Guys, welcome back to the show. We've got some more report card series to talk about today. If you guys missed those earlier episodes, don't forget to head over to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe right there, or follow us on any platform that you're listening. You can also follow us on Twitter at RBLR Sports or at RBLR Lightning so you don't miss out on old episodes and future episodes as well. But continuing the report card series today, talking about Pat Maroon, PEB, Corey Perry, and Tanner Jeannot as well. But guys, how you doing today?
Always a pleasure. Well. We can never figure out who goes first.
Well, before we jump right into it, too, as well, I do want to mention, guys, we are still going for nominations for the best podcast. So if you guys are who are listeners would do us a favor and over there and give us a nomination for best podcast on Creative Loafing's Best of the Bay. The link is over at RBLR Sports. You just head over there, click on the link. You can go to the entertainment section and go down to best podcast. We really appreciate your nomination. That happens until the end of the 30th as well. Link is also in the description as well if you guys want to go check that out and do it. But I say let's just jump right into it. Let's start talking some hockey. We're going to start off with Pat Maroon, guys. And Maroon, you know, he's an interesting player. I saw a stat that came up that said Maroon and now I'm blanking on the player's name, of course, but Joe, it's the guy you talked about maybe coming over for the Lightning who just won for Vegas. Help me out here because I cannot think of his Phil Kessel. Phil Kessel and Pat Maroon have won, I think it was 6 of the last 8 Stanley Cups in the NHL. So Pat Maroon, a big part of that, but he's not exactly a crazy stats guy as you might look at. He this year, 80 games played, 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 total points, was a -5. But I think he holds a special place in Lightning fans' hearts, and he does play a pivotal role for the Lightning.
Real quick, already I saw on social media that there was a picture of Phil Kessel. I believe he was golfing with the Stanley Cup, and of course, the Stanley Cup was filled up with hot dogs. So no Classic. One but that guy, yeah. But yeah, I mean, Maroon definitely is a role player, right? He's a role player type of guy. But it was a pretty rough season for him. I mean, you know, to say the least, in my opinion, at least, you know, you don't expect big points out of him, but you do expect big hits and for him to be difficult to play against. This year we saw a regression in all aspects of his game, more penalty minutes, especially as he engaged in more fights, or really what they were is hugging matches, fewer points and a negative plus-minus. If, you know, last year would have been considered like a decent run for him to be as a benchmark for this year. You know, I think he took a pretty big step backwards.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'm quite as down on Maroon as some of the other guys. I see he's kind of the punching bag, especially for fans of other teams. But I don't know. I think he knows his role. I think he plays his role well. The fighting and more like the hugging aspect, I think that can go away a little bit. Like I think he was probably like top 5 in the league in fights this year, but how many actual fights did he have? Probably on one hand. But no, I think it definitely was a regressive year for him, but I think he plays his role well. Like if you ask, I hate to bring up the word intangibles, but he does bring some. If you ask any player in the league who's the best chirper, there's going to be, 2 answers. It'll be Brad Marchand. It'll be Pat Maroon. Despite, maybe his lackluster play on the ice, getting under your opponent's skin is a crucial part of the game, and he does live rent-free in a lot of players' heads. He's got some very creative chirps, and he's very, he's he's confident, despite everyone calling him Fat Pat. Whatever you can say about him, he owns it. He really does, and he did have a little bit of controversy this year with the whole what's the Boston play-by-play guy calling him fat earlier. He really owned it well. He's what they call a glue guy. He's somebody that everybody loves, everybody can get along with. He's an energy guy off the ice. He's not much of an energy guy.
By the way,
Jack Edwards, that's what it was.
You're right though. His comeback on that was like epic. He trolled him right back and got the better of him. His ability to like you said, live rent free and dish it out verbally is pretty much second to none.
Yeah, and it's going back to intangibles. I think it's such a cliche word, but he is a very, very crucial part of the locker room. It's cliche, but it's very, very true. You'll never hear a bad word come out of a teammate's mouth when speaking about Pat Maroon. Everybody loves him. He's a great locker room guy. Again, his play might not be the best on the ice. He did take a step back this year, but I think he's an important piece to the Lightning team. I mean, he's a fan favorite. There's no doubt about it. I don't hear anything bad coming from any of the Tampa fans' mouths. I know St. Louis fans miss him. I know New Jersey fans miss him. Edmonton fans miss him. Like he leaves his mark. He's definitely an impact player, despite not having the stats for it.
I think the best way to look at Maroon is right in between both of your takes, right? Like, yes, Maroon regressed this year. You look at what he was able to do this year. I mentioned 14 points earlier. Last year, he had 27 points, 11 goals, 16 assists, 18 points the year before that, and then 23 the year before that. So he had his worst year with the Lightning, but like you said, Matt, he fits his role very well. He's not meant to be out there and scoring a ton of goals. Really, to me, that's just a bonus for Pat Maroon. He's out there to be that enforcer, annoying guy that's chirping all the way home. So I think it was kind of a middle of the pack year for him. I think he still played his role as he was supposed to, but definitely just we've come to expect so much of these guys, and Maroon has played particularly pretty well for the Lightning over the last couple of years, that when his points drop off a little bit, I think it hurts him overall.
I mean, when it comes down to it, there's a lot that can be said for what happens off the ice and morale of the team. But there's so many veteran players on this team and so many people that can play a vocal role that, if you're not effective on the ice, it makes me wonder, do you think that there's still enough room for a guy like this? Now, he is signed for $1 million for next season. That's all that his hit is, and that's all that's left on his contract. So it's not like he's going anywhere. He'll still be on the team. But do you think that he is still effective on the ice?
I do. I believe so. It might change game by game, but I think, again, going back to what I was saying, I think, the coaches, especially John Cooper, loves Patty Maroon. And I don't think he's, a liability or anything. Again, his speed is definitely not one of his attributes, but I don't think he's a turnover machine or anything like that. I think he, for playing limited sheltered minutes, I think he does his job adequately. I won't say well, but I think he's, I'm not going to say a perfect fourth liner, but he's still a very serviceable player on a fourth line.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Matt. I think he is effective, and I would like to see him on the Bolts for a couple more years, depending on how long he decides to play. Because, again, you're not expecting him to go out there and score 30 goals. You're expecting him to be a tough player to play against, and I think he can bounce back. This was kind of not as great of a year points-wise, but I think he can come back and play well. How many times before the Lightning went on this run did we say, hey, the Lightning need to be more physical. They need to get some more gritty guys. Because right now they're all skill and just speed, and that hurt them for the longest time. And they went out and got guys like Coleman and Goodrow. Now, Coleman and Goodrow scored a lot more than Pat Maroon ever did. But the point being, those are also guys who could throw the body around. So I think it's really important to have those players on your team. So I still absolutely seeing him being an important part of this team, especially because I think we're going to lose a couple of the guys that we'll get to later on the show. But let's go to the grades. What are your guys' overall grades for Pat Maroon? Joe, I'll start with you. What do you got?
Actually, I'd prefer to go last on this one because I think you guys may have swayed me a little bit.
All right, Matt, I'll start with you then. What do you got?
Man, I had a lot of time to prepare for this, but I really, I don't know. This might be honestly the hardest one to grade because, again, grading relatively. I'm not comparing him to.
I agree. The same thing with me. I agree.
I'm not comparing him to Nikita Kucherov, but I guess with how much, how highly I did talk about him, I'll give him I can't go full C. I'll give him a C minus. Again, we would have liked to see a lot more from him. I was expecting a bit of a step back, and I'm going to expect another step back this coming season. I mean, skills never really been his thing, but again, the intangibles that he does bring, the locker room camaraderie that he does bring, people love him, and other opponents hate him. I think that's a very, very invaluable thing he brings to this team. I think he played his role well. I would give him a higher grade if he chose to throw a single punch at all this year instead of just hugging. He'd be in the B area, but I'll go C minus. He was adequate, but I would have liked to see more from him.
I'm going to tend to agree with you, Matt. I'm going to go C overall just because I think, the points don't weigh as much as a heavy part of the grading scale for me, if you will. But I basically agree to exactly what you said, Matt. He played his role. We're not expecting him to do what Nikita Kucherov does out there every single day. So I'm going C.
Yeah, I just looked up the stats. He actually was number 1 in the league for penalty minutes with his 150. I was actually trying to find out how many of those were majors for fighting versus maybe a hook, trip, slash, etc. Wasn't able to pull that up quickly enough, but I want to see those penalty minutes go down for next season for sure. If the fighting ones, if you're eliminating another guy, fine. They even out. I was going to go a little bit harsher for the rating. I think last year he had a pretty decent year. I gave him like a B plus on last year. So this year I was going to say that I was actually going to drop it down to the D mark, but you guys were compelling enough to give him a C minus.
Hey, there we go. We got Joe to come up to a C minus. I'm impressed with our skills there, Matt.
You guys were right. He did bring some goods to the table that I was discounting. So you bumped him up. He owes you guys a beer.
You're fair to point out that he definitely regressed in the point system. And hopefully we'll see a bounce back from him next year and then he can improve. I'm sure he wants to play better. I'm sure if you asked him, he's like, yeah, I didn't score as nearly as much as I wanted to. There's a couple times where it felt like he was snake bitten, but a C minus overall for Pat Maroon, and all things considered, the kind of role he is, still pretty decent. I'd like to see him a little bit better, but he might have to play that bigger role, especially with how the Lightning are going to be handling this offseason. So speaking of that fourth line and guys who may not come back, let's look at PEB, as many of us like to call him, Bellemare. He's an interesting one. He had a really rough part of the season. He played in 73 games total, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 total points, -9 on the season. But there was a big stretch there, I feel like, guys, where it seemed like Bellemare just couldn't get it going, and he was really snake bitten. And then, when you had guys like Jeannot come up and even Balcers for a little bit there, it felt like he was kind of put to the wayside and wasn't getting into the lineup as much, although he still played 73 games overall. I felt like for him, it was definitely one of his roughest seasons we've seen.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about him a lot during the regular season as well, and it's someone that I almost treated like a punching bag, wanting to see him play better.
Yeah, me and Joe definitely, I won't say we picked on him, but we were particularly hard on him. But I don't know. He is definitely another step back. It's unfortunately a reoccurring theme with this whole line. I think he's definitely a more skilled player than Pat Maroon. I think he's got a lot more in his tool set in regards to offense, but I think he's just so defensively minded that it really impacts his offense. Early on this year, I don't know what was going on with him. It was rough early this year. He didn't have either of the offense or the defense. Like, he was just a step behind everybody. But as the season went along, I thought he got, better. He was, who we were accustomed to. Like, I thought all of the 21-22 season, like, he was phenomenal for a fourth liner. He was clutch. He was responsible. Didn't see many mistakes coming from him. This year is a little bit of the inverse. There were a lot of mistakes he was making. He was a step behind a lot of people. But again, picking it up towards the end of the season, I thought he was playing a lot better. It might, be a little bit of recency bias, but I thought he ended off the season rather well. I think he even got the scoring started in the playoffs this year, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think he got the first goal in that Toronto series, but I don't know. We all would like to see a little bit more from him. It really kills me to talk down on him because he's one of my favorite personalities. I know it's hard to separate the two, but he is one of just the coolest, awesome, smartest people you'll ever meet. I wish I'd have a chance to. So he's a free agent, right? Or does he still have one more year?
I'll pull that up while you finish up.
Regardless, I would have liked to see a little bit more from him. I know I keep saying that about everybody, but again, picking it up towards the end of the year, I thought he finished off rather well.
Yeah, I mean, he had a strong finish. He had 2 points in the postseason, which may not seem like a lot, but Lightning only played 6 total games, 1 round. So he was pretty decent in the playoffs. Definitely had a stronger end than the start of his season for sure. But for whatever reason, I guess it was that beginning of the part of the season where it just felt like he was a step behind. I think that's what really hurt him at the end of the day, especially, when he was a pretty decent player for the Lightning, I believe, overall the year before. I mean, you look at last season, 80 games played, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. So not that huge of a difference. Really the big difference for him comes in the plus-minus category. He was a plus 24 last year, which is actually really impressive now that I look at it. He was a minus 9 this year. So, again, he's a guy that you don't expect a ton from every single year, kind of like with Maroon. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just how he played last year or it was just that really tough beginning stretch. It just felt like he wasn't himself this year. I know he did have that family thing that went on, which was a total unfortunate situation for him. But I don't know if he comes back next year.
Oh, well, I mean, his contract is up. I don't think he's going to be re-signed. I mean, he did have a tough start to the season, struggled through most of it. He looked visibly slow at 38 years old. Maybe age is starting to show. And again, if for the last year going as a benchmark as like a rough B, this season his points were less. His plus-minus differential from last year a negative 35 compared to what he did. Did I do that math right? Yeah, compared to what he did last year. He had more penalty minutes, and I will say his penalty kill at the end of the season and into the playoffs was really strong. He started to kill penalties off with authority, and that was the best thing that he was bringing to his game. Something that I really think that he stepped up quite a bit with. But overall, I mean, he isn't really known as one of the role players who are engaging the team and demanding more out of them. So with him going, it opens up spots for guys that are younger, guys that are faster, and guys that can hopefully fill that role. So I mean, I have him marked pretty low as a grade as well for this one.
All right, well, let's go to the grades right now. I'll start this one off. I'm going to go C- for him. I think, again, it's kind of similar to Maroon. I didn't have huge expectations for him, but it felt like he took a step back this year and just wasn't himself. I can't give him a D just because he was really good in the postseason. And as you mentioned, Joe was good on the penalty kill for the Lightning. So I'm going to go C-.
Yeah, I actually go a little bit below it, go with the D+. And really the saving grace being what he did in the postseason, because I felt like he was almost a detriment to the team at times.
I share the same thought with Joe. I think me and Joe were on the same wavelength throughout the whole season regarding Bellemare. Again, it hurts me to talk down on him, but given how long it took for him to bring his game up and how rough that game was early on in the season, I'm agreeing with Joe exactly. Again, on the same wavelength, D+.
All right, there you go. So I think it's our first D that we've handed out this year. But hey, you know what? He was a great player for the Lightning. He may come back. Who knows? I don't think it's likely. But he, like you said, Matt, he was a fan favorite. So a lot of people really enjoyed watching him play. But a D+ overall for Bellemare. All right, let's go to Corey Perry, one of the last of the big fourth liners. Corey Perry is a guy who everybody always says he's the one that you want to have on your team, but you don't want to be playing against him because he is just a giant pest constantly for whoever he's up against. 81 games played, 12 goals, 13 assists for 25 points. But the big number here on his stat sheet, guys, he was a minus 28, which is not ideal. But I felt like there were times or stretches of games where Perry was just super clutch for the Lightning. Maybe it's more the postseason bias as he had 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points in the postseason. He was really good in the postseason. He got hot late. But that plus minus stat is just kind of killer for him.
Yeah, Perry. I mean, with some flashes of brilliance during the regular season, I was pretty hopeful that something would stick with him and he'd be more productive. And while he's a strong leader off the ice, his on-ice play was less than what I expected from him. Again, fewer points, less speed, more penalty minutes, and that absolutely atrocious plus-minus. Holy smokes.
I didn't think his defensive game was all that bad. Again, plus minus is a bit of a iffy stat, but when you're minus 20, was 24 or 28?
28, minus 28.
Minus 28.
Oh, man. I mean, it's not an outlier. I mean, if you're minus 28, you're doing something wrong. But I didn't think he played all that bad this year. The only thing is he was very, very streaky because there were some nights where he looked like 26-year-old MVP Corey Perry, and there were some nights where he looked like a ghost. I mean, you couldn't tell he was out there. And you could tell another one of these players that had a major regression this year in terms of the speed. I think he still got one of the best hands on the team. I mean, you would see how many times would he try to toe drag somebody, and it would work, but he would always, be in the right spot, have great positioning, just didn't have the speed to get by or, have the speed to even maintain pace with anybody. So that was a huge killer for me. But again, I don't think the defensive game was all that bad for him either. Again, he's just like Pat Maroon. He brings a lot of intangible benefits. Like, he's one of the biggest pests in the league. I mean, you don't get a nickname the Worm in junior for nothing. In junior, he got that nickname. So, I don't know. He's always just such a joy to watch. He was one of my favorite players not on the Lightning. This goes back to when he was on the Ducks. I always adored him. I just love those pesky, easy-to-hate players, and I was ecstatic when he joined the Lightning. It's going to be sad to see him go. I think we can kind of write him off. He'll probably sign with another team or something, but man, he did have a bit of a rough year. But just my biggest issue with him is he was super, super streaky this year.
So before we go to the grades, I do want to bring this up because I'm looking at the stat now. Last year, Corey Perry, 82 games played. He had 19 goals, 21 assists for 40 points. So a big drop off for him when you look at from the scoring side of things, and he was a +9 last year. So there is a major jump when you look at the stat sheets. I know that the stats aren't everything. There's also the eye test, but that's quite the significant drop off. I agree with you, Matt. I do really like Corey Perry. I didn't think I would like him coming on the Lightning, but he won me over very quickly with how he played early on. And then the only saving grace for me this year was the playoffs. I mean, he was fantastic in the playoffs. Let's go to the grades. I'm having a tough time with this one. I think I'm going to go with a D+, and I have to go to the D just because that jump from last year to this year is a huge one. So I can't believe I'm doing it, but D+.
Wow. I mean, shoot, I was even considering a C- for his play, mostly just because of the playoffs. I can't believe I'm going to have a rating higher than Jake's.
So wait, what was it? A C+?
I'm gonna go C. No, C-.
Oh.
Definitely not a C+. It was a below average performance in my opinion, but I wasn't gonna go quite as low as a D.
I'm gonna go at a solid C. Yeah, again, from the eye test, there were some mistakes, but none of them were detrimental to me. It seemed like I don't know where that minus 28 comes from. Like, did you really think he was that awful defensively this year?
Yes.
Genuine question. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I thought it was more of the. I didn't think it was him personally, but probably him, the fourth line as a whole. That school bus line, even when it was separated, they just weren't, syncing. They weren't working in unison together. So I'm not going to pin all the blame on him, despite him having the worst defensive stats of anybody else on that line. But he's so hard for me to criticize because he does bring a lot to the team. Kind of the same way I look at Pat Maroon, the intangibles. Cliche, I know, but he's a great chirper, great locker room guy, such a pest on the ice, and he actually threw some punches this year too.
It was the stats last year. Looking at the stats last year for me is what really just swayed me right at the end there, because I was originally thinking some low C grade, but then seeing how good he was last year and just the major drop off, I was like, oh boy, that wasn't great. I agree with you, Matt. Like there definitely wasn't any point, I feel like, during the season where I was like, holy cow, Corey Perry is having an awful year, because it's those moments that he did have. He was really good, especially he was huge for the Lightning in the postseason for sure, but I've come to expect so much of this, and maybe it's just unfair for me to expect so much of this team every single year. It's hard when you have those kind of expectations on you, but it's that comparison when you look at last year. It's a major drop off for him. Maybe last year was kind of an anomaly.
He was, to me, last year and this year, he was very clutch to me, and I do take that into account. Whenever we did have to pull Vazir, Elliott, he would be one of the extra skaters. He'd be one of the people on the 6-on-5, and it seemed like he got a lot done on those 6-on-5s. I know that's kind of a niche example, kind of a minute thing to give him cookies on, but I thought he was pretty clutch. He had some very timely goals. Tying goals. I'm not sure how many game-winning goals he had, if any, but I feel like he had a lot of tying goals, and if not goals, a lot of just pesky Corey Perry-ish things that he did very well this year. So there are a lot of bones to pick in his game. He was very, very slow and sloppy this year, but I'm not as down on him as everybody else.
You know what, Matt? You do bring up a good point, because there's an aspect that I often talk about a lot for players, and that's the locker room aspect. And Corey Perry, I know, is known as one of the leaders in that locker room because he is a big-time veteran guy, and I know the Lightning love having him in that locker room, which is something I didn't think about or factor in too much, and he is huge for the Lightning in that aspect. He's a big leader in that locker room. So, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. I'm going to stick with the D plus, because even I think a C minus is not that much of a difference. And that's probably where I would go to, if anything, but averaging out all the grades we gave him today, it's still a C overall for Corey Perry. I think he still might come back next year if he's willing to take a vet minimum. I don't know if he's willing to do that, but I think if he wants to try and win another cup, I think this is the best place to do it. I think he'd be willing to take a cheap deal, which the Lightning could use with their cap situations. I will say this. I feel like we've been doing so much negativity in this episode, talking about these guys who had these rough years. I say we throw some positive things out there. I'm going to give you guys an exclusive code. If you head over to the shop.rblrsports.com, you can use code BOLTS for 10% off your order. Check out the awesome inspired merch we have for each of the team: Rays, Lightning, Bucks, Rowdies, you name it, we got it. Head over there to shop.rblrsports.com. Links, as always, are in the description as well, and you can use code BOLTS for 10% off your order. So be sure to go and check that out. So going from Corey Perry, we got one more player to talk about, and that's Tanner Jeannot. And I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say about him, because there's not a huge sample size for Tanner Jeannot. Just like Simon, he came over at the trade deadline for the Lightning. And then, of course, he was hurt this year, and that definitely did not help him for the Lightning's case. Now, he played 20 games with the Lightning, had 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 total points. And then in the postseason, he had 3 games played, did not score or have any assist, and was a -2. Guys, Tanner Jeannot is a tough one for me, because I felt like we gave up way too much for Tanner Jeannot. And I know, you want more of a sure thing than throwing a dart at a dartboard sometimes with the draft picks. But it is still very early for him, only 20 games played. But the price is making things, I think, look a lot worse on Tanner Jeannot.
Well, it's you said it already. It's too small of a sample size, and also those draft picks were in hopes that he would re-sign with the Lightning, and it'd be something that's going to be longer term. We won't know how good of an acquisition it was for potentially several years. So, I'd say hold on the negativity just for a little bit in terms of giving up those picks, especially because 4th and 5th round picks aren't worth anything at all realistically. And, let's see what sort of a player we got out of him. We did see a few things from Tanner Jeannot that were very exciting. I mean, he reminded me of what we all kind of want Pat Maroon to be. He goes out there, he lays the body, and when he fights, oh my God, he's fighting for keeps. That was one of the most who did he knock out?
Riley Stillman.
That was one of the most exciting. That was the most exciting fight for the Lightning of the season. I mean, and he dummied a guy that went after him, like that targeted Jeannot. He just absolutely dummied him and sent a message to the entire NHL. If that's not worth the price of admission, I don't know what is.
Stillman challenged him, and Jeannot fed him a first, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and Calfoot. I love that joke. But that one was brutal. He's a very, very entertaining player to watch. Like, I was super stoked when we got him. I really adored him in Nashville. But yeah, the price is really difficult to get over, especially the guy, like when we were doing our, pre-trade deadline talks, the guy I kept bringing up was Ivan Barbashev, and Vegas got him for one late first round pick, and we gave up a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth and Calfoot in addition to a first, albeit a later first. It's still a first. We get it. I get it. The draft picks, throwing a dart blindfolded at a dartboard, whatever. The thing that does scare me about those picks is now that Barry Trotz is going to be the new GM in Nashville. He told his scouts, his amateur scouts, he told them, don't be afraid to do an off the board pick. Don't be afraid to look at somebody who is a high risk, high reward type of player. And I am terrified of one of those players being a Lightning pick. I know it won't be an issue. It won't be known until 10 years later or something like that. But I'm, really lamenting the day that it comes out that, the third rounder we sent is a 40 goal scorer or something like that. That's the worst case scenario or something, but I don't know. It's really tough to get over that, but he's such an exciting player to watch play. Like, he lays hits, whether it be with his fists, his shoulder, his hip. I mean, he's an injection of old time hockey, and I know the Lightning kind of have a surplus of that old time hockey. We're a bigger, now slower ish team.
His hands.
He does have good hands. I think a lot of us were forgetting that he scored like 25 goals in his rookie season. That doesn't just vanish. 25 goals is not a fluke season. He wasn't playing first line. He was playing second and third line on Nashville. And mind you, this is a offensively challenged Nashville team. They were at or near the bottom. They were definitely bottom half of the league in goals for. UC Saros was stealing them a lot of games, which is why they were so, in the playoff race till the very end. He was essentially their entire team this year. So I don't think it goes away. I think if he gets a full training camp with the Lightning, gets assimilated, hopefully it's, the Brandon Hagel syndrome. I pray that it truly is the Brandon Hagel syndrome. Pretty rough start to the season. Maybe he could have picked it up in the playoffs. I think he definitely came back too soon. There's no way that leg wasn't injured for him. There's no way it was fully healed. So a full off season of rest, a full training camp with the Lightning, and hopefully I didn't like him playing buried on the fourth line. I get that's the kind of style of player he is, but third line, and if he performs rather well, second line, I think that'd be really awesome. I'd love to see some more goals from him. I don't think 25 goals to 6 goals drops off that, excessively. I think he's primed to have a bounce back season.
And you mentioned something that is one of the reasons why I made it so hard to come up with any sort of a grade. I mean, I put very little stock in the way that I even graded him, is that he was playing on the fourth line, where we just spent the first half of this show talking about how inept and anemic the fourth line was. So did he even get a fair shake in terms of, did Jeannot even get a fair shake in terms of who he is playing with to be able to demonstrate any sort of value at all for the team, what he potentially could bring in? Then he did get injured. He only played 76 of the full 82 game season because he had that injury. He came in and wasn't as quick. I noticed not as fast with foot speed. So it's really hard to to know how well he could potentially play because he got stuck on a line with guys that couldn't carry the play, and if he's expected to be the only one to carry the play, that's not really his style of game.
Listen, there's a couple of things, right? You guys, Joe, you're absolutely right. 20 games played. He was playing on the fourth line. He got hurt. It's really hard to get a read on him and really what he's going to be able to do with the Lightning. Matt, I think you make a great point. He could absolutely have a Brandon Hagel type season next year and really bounce back. It is still way too early to make judgment calls on him. Again, it was just the price for me that scared me and what makes it so much harder for me. And I get it. Listen, draft picks aren't a sure thing, but the Lightning, they're pretty darn good at drafting. I mean, how many guys have we had late round picks that have turned into huge things? If Jeannot was traded for, I don't know, a second and a third, or maybe throw the fourth in there too, just a couple less picks, I'm nowhere near as concerned as I am right now. I absolutely hope Jeannot comes out and becomes one of the top players, because then guess what, Matt? If Nashville does get a star player 10 years down the road, it's not going to matter because we got a guy that can win now and fit with the Lightning because they're in win now mode, as Joe, you've talked about before on this podcast. So it's not end all be all right now. It's that price. It's such a big price tag that it's that sticker shock value. You look at, you're like, whoa. And then you look at the stats and you're like, I know he didn't have all the time to really get acclimated and he's still new, but it's like, I just feel like we paid a lot for this at this time. That can quickly change with how he plays next season. It's going to be a big year for him. And I do think he'll sign long-term as well for the Bolts.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens next season, because if we're losing Bellemare and potentially Perry, one thing that the school bus line did really well, not last 2023, but 21-22, is they cycled the puck in the offensive zone. It'd be 45 seconds of cycling, maybe without a real scoring chance, but just maintaining puck possession. This year, the fourth line really struggled with speed. They struggled on the forecheck, the back check, maintaining possession. The line needs to be able to eat up some minutes, wear down the opposition. Perry, Belly, Maroon just didn't have it this year. They look slower and out of place even. With Jeannot, that might be the youthful exuberance that you need to reinvigorate the fourth line and maybe give someone like Pat somebody to play with that could really answer a lot of questions that are coming up. So, I mean, I am pretty hopeful to see what happens.
And all right, let's go ahead, Matt.
With possibly likely Perry and Bellemare leaving, and with all four of them on the team, it might have been a too many cooks in the kitchen type of situation. There might have been too many of the same / similar style players, albeit they have their own attributes and qualities. Maybe he does have more of a defined role on the team with the departure of Perry and Bellemare. I think that we're expecting. So again, I am betting on a bounce back for him.
All right, let's go to the grades. I know this is a tough one to do just because he didn't play a ton. I'm going to go with a C because I think that's, middle of the pack. Like, we didn't get to see anything amazing from him right away. He wasn't terrible. It's too early to judge. So right in the middle of the pack, I'm going with a C overall. Joe, what about you? C+.
He gets that plus for that KO.
I like that.
I'm going with two letters, and it's K and O. I'm kidding. I'm going to go straight C. I think it's unfair to grade him at all. So I'm just going to go middle of the pack. Just give him a solid C because he didn't play bad. I don't think.
No, he's a tough guy to grade, and also he had an injury that's obviously out of his control too, which was really unfortunate timing for the Lightning. But hey, hopefully he has a Brandon Hagel type season and he's able to bounce back in a big way and make a big impact for the Lightning many years down the road. So we forget about that sticker shock.
Jake, I'm going to make a bold prediction. Like you said, 30 goals for Hagel. I'm going 20 goals for Tanner Jeannot. Over 20 goals, but it'll be 20 minimum. I'm betting it right now. Trust me.
You know what? I don't hate it. And I could easily see him doing that. If he's able to get acclimated just like Hagel did, I could easily see. But, the biggest thing for him.
And if he's wearing blue.
And if he's wearing blue, absolutely. There's no way you trade that much for a guy and then don't sign him long term. I would be shocked.
They're going to try. I assume they're going to try signing him, but if he decides this isn't going to be his home, what can you do?
See, now that's a situation. If they can't bring him back long term, that's going to put a damper on this, especially with the sticker
his rights
that we paid for him.
His rights are restricted. He's an RFA, so I don't know. I think maybe his lackluster season with Nashville and Tampa, I think it might be a blessing in disguise. Again, I'm betting on a huge bounce back, knocking on wood here, but I think if we can lock him up to a low cap hit, relatively, let's say a bridge deal, 2 or 3 year deal or something like that, to hopefully boost his value up and keep him with the Lightning for a little bit. Again, I'm betting on a bounce back season, so hopefully we can keep that cap hit down and keep him for a couple of years or something like that. That is what I'm praying and betting on.
Well, that's going to do it for us, guys, in this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening along with us here during this offseason. Don't forget, if you want to check out some of the older episodes, you can do so right here on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. You can follow us on social media at RBLR Sports or at RBLR Lightning so you can get all of the latest episodes there as well. Don't forget to nominate us for Best Podcast. Get a chance. We really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Go Bolts.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.